Welcome to Reality Bytes Radio on the 20th of March 2014. Yesterday was budget day, of course, and we were down in Parliament watching the circus that is the mainstream media, supposedly covering the events of the day, but all controlled by the BBC. But we'll talk about that on Monday in the news segment and other things that went on that day as well. And my adventure today, travelling, it's another story. But anyway, we have Alan Watt on the line. And Alan's been off here for a while, and he put a little post on his website on the 20th of February, basically saying that he was living under the worst winter he's ever seen in Ontario, and it was down to minus 40, shoveling snow, and they call it global warming, I believe. You there, Alan?
That's right, yeah. And it's been pretty cold since November. I haven't seen, the snow's been here since November, by the way, still snowing. And the temperatures were in the sub-zeros from November quite frequently right through to the present time. Just last week I was hitting 35 below.
Yeah. Well, I mean, of course, I've spoken on here before about what we're doing down in Somerset, and we're actually making a documentary about the whole thing. And the people down there are actually starting to understand that flooding is not an accident. The previous floods weren't accidents, and they're actually talking now about Agenda 21. And I've had... Interestingly, I've had a couple of engineers, environmental engineers, and consultancy groups down there call the office and ask what we're about and what the documentary is going to be about, what angle we're coming from. And I've mentioned Agenda 21 to them a couple of times, and they didn't really know anything about it. They'd heard about it, but they didn't know anything about it. But now they're starting to look at it and coming back to me and say, some of the stuff they're doing here is it's very similar to what you've just told us on Agenda 21. I says, well, that's because that's what it is. This is deliberate policy. So we had an email exchange, you and I, and we wanted to do really the whole kind of history, where all this greenism, if you want to call it that, came from. And I mentioned to you before, I remember reading a book by H.G. Wells in which he talked about energy being a currency in the future, and that was back in the 20s, 1920s. So, I mean, it goes back a long, long way, and many people believe this only came out of the Rio summit, but it was on the go a long, long time before that. Do you want to, go back to the very start of it?
Well, we can go back, way back, in fact, to the time when even you'll find that Britain really was the first country to have recorded, and I think it was much older, but they had recorded corporations, big corporations, like the British East India Company, and that was to do with trade. And the whole idea of that was to bring in a system of free trade, which wasn't free at all. It was to limit the market to their own traders by joining treaties, etc. And going back to the 1500s and the 1600s, and that took off big time. So that the idea was very old. John Dee talked about the British Empire with free trade, and he presented it to the Queen as well. This idea of he called it Brightish, B-R-Y-T, Brightish Empire with free trade. The idea being that those who signed on to it would have to adopt that British system of government, you see, a monopoly, a commonwealth of nations. And that's the whole idea that you had later on too with the New Atlantis, with Bacon, etc. So it was a corporate thing for monopolization. This has gone down through the centuries, the same idea. You'll find that the Crown of England, for instance, and all other crowns, for that matter, across Europe, all related, they all have these crown corporations. Crown corporations are difficult things for even companies that are government-owned, like the CBC Canada, very much like the BBC, to investigate, because they can't get past the outer shell of what exactly it is. Partly there's limited partnership or there's limited shares for it, but it's not given to the public. We know that the Queen of England, or the King, in George Orwell's day, his dad worked for one of the corporations in Burma when they ran the British Opium Company, and his dad was in charge of it, and that came out in the 1920s in the British Parliament. And they found out that it was a complete monopolization. Only royal family and the members of the royal family and some of the top bankers had shares in it. It wasn't offered to the public. The British folk at that time thought it was abolished, but it wasn't. And it was a politician, an MP called Thompson, I think his name was, that brought it up in Parliament, and it astounded everybody it was still on the go. So monopolization is the idea. In the late 1800s, their man, they had their own guys in the US for a long time to create the similar partnerships or deals for this international monopolization of all trade, including all energy, of course, and so on. And Rockefeller was the guy that they used for that one. And he was one of the robber barons, of course, strategically placed, and his son was coached and trained for his role. And he eventually became the oil baron for the States. He took over all oil through all means possible. It's incredible, the network that he had. He had his own intelligence service worldwide to be ahead of everybody else's game. Once they deregulated it under the antitrust laws, Standard Oil, and the reason it was called Standard Oil was to standardize all the oil industry under one, in fact, his system. And he would have shares in all the companies. In fact, they had to pay him off, or he'd put them under. Quite openly, he publicized this, that if you don't join me, I'll put you under. And he did. He put lots of them under, competitors. Other ones were burned out and so on. It's all fear and love and war and business. And that's what they did. But he also was a boy to start off the organization that wouldn't just control all energy, but all policy for the world through amalgamations and treaties, etc. So he became the head of the Council on Foreign Relations when eventually they gave it that name. They had it before under his family, but they didn't have it out in the open. In Britain, they had it before, as we well know, with Lord Alfred Milner and the Cecil Rhodes Foundation, along with Lord Rothschild, etc. And they became the Royal Institute for International Affairs. They couldn't call it Royal Institute for International Affairs in the US. There'd been an outcry, so they called it the Council on Foreign Relations. And then every British Commonwealth country has their own department. You had the Canadian ones for international affairs, Australian, New Zealand, even India, in fact, they left a big one there too, and other ones across the old British Empire. Still on the go, of course, and still working towards the same agenda. And their idea was to create the world as it should be run by them, naturally, and their offspring. The intelligentsia, the wealthy intelligentsia, should rule the world. Quite simply, that was it. And they'd proven that they were the wealthy intelligentsia by holding on to their money for generations, marrying for good breeding as opposed to any other reason. Good breeding and money, of course, it always marries itself. And that was your certificate of good breeding, the fact that you had the good money. So it's a monopolization of all the world, all of its resources, etc. They funded, as we well know, the communist revolution through the bankers. A lot of the big bankers got on board with them because they had their own agenda at one point. And so they funded the Soviet Union as a kind of an enemy. To get progress, as you call it, you must have an enemy. You see, you must have if there's no enemy, everything remains static. People love a system that they've been born into that doesn't change. We're like that. That's human nature. We get used to whatever conditions we're in, even when we're slaves. And so to change things in a certain direction, you must plan the outcome. And how do you get to the outcome that you want? Well, you must have an opposition that complains. You have skirmishes, verbal battles, whatever, or even physical ones. Then you have compromise. And of course, that's your thesis, antithesis, and so on, and synthesis. You plan the synthesis. That's the whole idea of oppositions. That's what Russia was built up to be. We know for a fact that private companies ran Russia through the Soviet Union. We know that families from New York and other places in the States flooded over there, went back to Russia. Actually, they didn't come mainly from Germany, but they went to Russia and they became the major domos, and they ran it right through until it supposedly collapsed, which it didn't, of course. So the idea was to create a complete united Europe. And they thought if the people would go along with the Russian idea first, they could do it quicker, but it didn't work out that way, so they went at the long haul instead. They wanted a united Americas. They wanted a Far Eastern conglomerate eventually to be built up with China at the head of it, at least the appearance of the head of it. Karl Marx talked about it. Many others talked about it later on from the same big foundations. And these big bankers, these ones who belonged to the Council on Foreign Relations, Rockefellers and so on, they set up these foundations to create all all the oppositions for everything. Lenin said it. He said, how you eliminate opposition is to lead it ourselves. Rather than wait for real opposition to start, because you're going to do something that's going to cause opposition, you put out the leaders there, and you train them to be the leaders, and you finance them to be the leaders. And then the public will say, yeah, that's just wrong, let's join this group, it's ready-made for us. And these people become your leaders. You go around in circles and you end up in a different place than you ever thought you're going to end up at all. So, old techniques, well used. They use these front organizations, the non-governmental organizations, to demand exactly what they want to be demanded. And then they monopolize the whole business of it, whether it's oil, energy, water, farming. In fact, the head of the United Nations Agricultural Department said that farming was too important to be left to farmers. And so what they did was they created the corporate farms. That was the idea behind it. Small business was to be ultimately limited altogether. And that's happened steadily, increasingly steadily, since the days of Maggie Thatcher, in fact, when half the day for a small business person was filling in forms for governments. You couldn't keep your business going that way. They know that too, and the taxation with them as well. Whereas the big corporations have teams of lawyers that deal with all the paperwork. They get special discount rates and all the rest of it too, because they lobby governments for the deals. The small guys can't do that. So the world that they've planned is a total energy market, and that means all goods, services. Everything you need to live on is to be run by these very old gangs, you might call them, very old families that got together openly, actually, as I say, in the late 1800s, under a few names that became really one name in the early 1900s. And these are the ones, of course, that Carroll Quigley talked about. He was part of it. He was all for the agenda, in fact. And you find that the only difference he had was some of their methods, because it's underhand, including creating wars to get what they want, and to control all media. That was the other big part of it too. The Rockefeller boys in the 1920s and into the 30s had lots of meetings about how to control all the media, and they're fantastic for doing scientific studies. We use think tanks, etc. That's why they created the Rand Corporation. That was one of the first big ones for them. And they found out that if they control 30 major newspapers in the States, that would control all of the media, because they'd all copy the 30 major ones if they owned them. And so they did that. Nothing's changed. They own them pretty well all today. And so you get the news, what you think is news. News doesn't mean truth, remember. It's just information. And that the court case that went up in the States a few years ago, with the journalistic team that was assigned to Fox News under contract, tried to investigate Monsanto, and of course all hell broke loose, and they tried to cancel their contract. I mean, all the way to the Supreme Court, and the judge said, you don't understand. He says the media has nothing to do with telling the truth. It doesn't have to tell the public the truth on anything. And that's just the way it really actually is. We've been trained to believe it's information which is true, but that's the furthest thing from the truth, you know.
Yeah, John, just to step in there. I mean, I mentioned off air to you earlier that we were down in Parliament yesterday, in the official press area right opposite in College Green. And we got a couple of people to come in and talk about the Bradbury Pound. They didn't have press cards, of course, so we had to bring them in to interview them in front of the House of Parliament. And we weren't allowed in until we were vetted by the BBC producer. And we weren't allowed to hand any leaflets out to the other major news outlets there. He had to do it, the BBC producer. And every live feed that came from Parliament that day had to go through the BBC. Every one of them.
Yeah. That's your official censorship department, yeah. You see, the British Empire set up a BBC organisation in every country, and in Canada they call it the CBC. In Australia, it's the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. These are government-controlled media outlets for the official, but they want the official news. They call it, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So they took over the energy markets, the natural resources of the planet, the water, as you say, the coal, diamonds, silver, gold, all of it. But was there a point where they thought, okay, we've secured enough of this stuff, whatever industry it was or whatever commodity it was, and then they took another step towards where we're heading now, down the Agenda 21 road. Was there a
It isn't
point?
even, there's many levels all working at the same time for the same organization. And they've written about it extensively, how it's done in their own books and publications, especially from those who are involved in these big foundations. When they're retired, they love to write their memoirs. But they tell you that they know that many different aspects of their agenda will take different time periods to fulfill. So they're all on the go simultaneously, but all are controlled at the top to make sure they kind of start to mesh along the way. Again, Quigley said the same thing about a foundation. He said, governments can come and go. If the governments were actually real, if there were once in history they were actually real, which they're not really what you think they are, then you'd have major changes all the time with different parties coming and going, and changes in policy, and even old policies thrown out the window and new ones brought in. It doesn't happen that way. You see one agenda continuously. And foundations are even better because a foundation can be set up, and I could set up maybe 500 foundations. Each one would have its part to play. And one foundation might be to take over all energy. One foundation their job might be to create socialism across the world, the appearance of socialism, which is actually destruction of everything which is independent of them, in actual fact. Socialism does not mean what the average person thinks it means. And so the foundation can go for 100 years or 150 years, hiring, retiring, hiring, and all through, but the same agenda till it's fulfilled its goal. It's got one policy, you see. There's no opposition coming in there. It's one policy until they fulfill it. So some parts of the agenda would take 150. That's why H.G. Wells and Shaw and the rest of them created the Fabian Society. To do the Fabian method as opposed to the communist method. They realized that the communist method wouldn't take off in Britain. So these very rich people, backed by the Astor family, the multimillionaires, created, they would be the leaders of socialism, you see. So, and they said that it might take 100 years to the millennium before they actually see anything their goals start to actually materialize. So they're counting on the year 2000 or so. And again, Lord Bertrand Russell talked about it too. He worked along with the Macy Group and the Frankfurt School, who were told to work after World War II together to create a new culture for the West, including America and Britain. And the intention was to destroy all the old values to bring in these new values, where people would actually think they were freer, by the way. And by doing that, they could then gradually, once you're into change, you can keep changing more frequently and speed up your agenda, which they have done. Well, he was involved in creating the culture that was to come out in the 1960s. By using the Macy Group, the Frankfurt School, and all the rest of them, and putting university professors through all the universities in the West, which were actually, a lot of them came from Russia and different countries like that, Soviet Russia. They came right in and got professors' jobs, many of them, or their sons did. So it was all working together. And people think there's left-wing and right-wing. No, it's one agenda. Because the capitalist system suits that of the West. And the communist system also suits the rulers of the West. That's what Quigley said. He said, we're often mistaken for the communists. But he says, because our agenda is much the same. Well, actually, it is the same. A communistic system with massive government bureaucracies and agencies running the general public, training us from birth to death, monitoring us from birth to death all through life, and an elite above them, which Charles Galton Darwin called the wild men, the ultra-rich who cannot be trained. They mustn't be trained because they're guiding the world. They mustn't have their minds controlled. They must be free to think and act, to make decisions. But everybody beneath them, as they said, won't need even free will because the government will be making all their decisions for them. This is the scientific system that H.G. Wells talked about. He was a propagandist for them through the Fabian Society. And Bernard Shaw himself said, and you'll see it on the Soviet story, that very good video, You'll see an old clip of Bernard Shaw, George Bernard Shaw, saying, when we rule, he says, you'll all have to come to us to justify why we should allow you to live. That's a system we're going into today. It's almost here. Yeah.
Yeah. He also mentioned, I think, in that clip, the big organisation of our society. Was it?
Yeah, that's right.
Which is David Cameron's Big Society.
The Great Society. Yeah,
and
right.
of course, Cameron is married into the Astor family. So
the Astor family, and more than the Astor family, he just gave his genealogy when he gave the speech in Israel last week. Did you listen to that one?
I didn't hear that one, no. What did he say?
Yeah, he started off with the big bankers. There was a whole bunch of banking families that he's descended from, and who are well known, by the way. And they rang the Shanghai Bank for them when they were doing all the opium trading through there and so on for his masters. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, we know where the politicians are getting their cocaine then, and their opium.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Moving on now. I mean, as you say, all these groups work at a different pace and a different agenda, different parts of the agenda. Was there a point they decided, right, we're ready to push this? The formulation of agenda. Is it time to push this? Because we have control of so much of the resources that we can actually pull it off.
Yeah.
Was that Rio, or did it start happening before that?
It was happening before that. In fact, you can actually go ways back in it, and you'll find that whenever they create a hero in politics, it's generally one of their own boys, and whatever they put down in official history books, you'll find is vastly different from the reality of the period. We know that Standard Oil, for instance, was told to deregulate, and all they did was put them into subsidiaries still owned by the Rockefellers, still today, by the way, you know. And that's how everything runs. It's like the big agribusinesses, like the 5 big agribusinesses are really all one, the same shareholders. There's no competition at all. But you're back into the days of as I say, of Theodore Roosevelt. And Theodore Roosevelt, he supposedly was a guy who was to champion the complaints against the Rockefellers' monopolies and tactics by deregulation. As I say, it was a complete sham. They simply put in sub-companies that they owned, but it gave him all the votes and popularity. But he also started at the same time working for the same boys, the same thing as Rockefeller was doing. He started up the national parks systems, where they would put massive chunks aside, etc., supposedly for the wilderness areas, etc. And in reality, they're full of all the oil and the gas that they're going to frack shortly, by the way. You know, these guys knew where everything was way back then. And so there's always an ulterior purpose. Like Bernard Brooks says, whatever they tell the public, from politics, he says there's always a good reason, then there's a real reason. That's how it is. So you'll find that Theodore Roosevelt really was a big one for pushing that whole movement. The foundations were doing the same thing. For putting aside national parks. They created, through the CFR, Royal Institute for International Affairs, they created the United Nations. That's their baby. They created the Bank for International Settlements, that they run that. The IMF, and they run a few other massive organizations. They're the guys who admitted on Canadian television in 2005 that they drafted up the treaty for the integration of Canada and the States and Mexico. A private organization is running the world here. We don't vote them in. But most folk haven't even heard of them. And it was a Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, Lloyd Axworthy, that was the head of it at the time, who helped draft up this integration policy for the integration of Canada. I mean, what's the point in voting if private organizations are really running the show and drafting up the treaties? By the way, their main organization in Britain, the Royal Institute for International Affairs, they're the ones who drafted up the treaty for the whole free trade integration of Europe scheme way back before World War II even ended.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're living through a script written by these private monopolies. You know?
Yeah, we were just talking about this the other day there in the office, and even at the council level, you know, you ask your councillor to help you out with something. They say, "Oh, well, I've got to toe the party line." Well, why did I vote for you then?
Yeah.
You know, you got to
exactly. Yeah.
You know,
yeah. Well, I mean, the guy's supposed to represent his own constituents, and the first thing he does when he gets, exactly, I got to vote with the party. But yeah, so what's the point in having them?
Of course.
What's the point?
the word party is a celebration, so I don't even know where that came from. But
Yeah.
you know, okay. We'll go to a short piece of music. I have no idea what's coming up because I wasn't too late tonight to pick the tunes, but I'm sure Steve's got something. And then yeah, we'll move on into basically the whole growth of the green industry or the green
Yeah.
industry, the green movement, for want of a
Yeah.
better word. Okay, well, take it away, Steve.
No lizards, no aliens, no nonsense. This is Reality Bytes in association with Sovereign Independent UK and One World Chronicle.
You're listening to awakeradio.co.uk, awakeradio.us, and shazizradio.com. Awake Radio. Straight talk for the awake and the aware.
Welcome back to Reality Bytes Radio with myself, Neil Foster, and our guest, Alan Watt of CuttingThroughTheMatrix.com. We were talking there before the break about the big plan to take over all the resources of the planet, which is pretty well done now. Of course, there's a lot of shale gas around the place, which they're desperately trying to grab a hold of. And this is all moving down the road of Agenda 21, which I'm sure many listeners are very familiar with. But it's quite amazing that the general public have no idea about this plan whatsoever. Even the people involved in consultation processes with councils who think they're genuinely doing the right thing by making low carbon this and that and the next thing. But when you speak to them and start giving them some information, they are of a kind of technical background and inquisitive nature, shall we say, and they do start looking at this stuff. And as I was saying earlier, people down in Somerset are now looking at this stuff and beginning to see through the propaganda of the greenies and all the rest of it, saying, "Oh, well, we've got to spend £3 million on birds, but I'm sorry, we can't buy you new carpets." And that's the way it's going. Just last week, or the week before, I think it was the week before, we had Kenny Valenzuela of Experimental Vaccines on. And just that week, the British government had announced that they were going to pay out 60 million to GlaxoSmithKline for the damage caused by the swine flu vaccine. And in the same week, down in Somerset, nobody was getting a penny from the insurance companies. So we know where the priorities lie, and it certainly isn't with the people.
Never was.
No. So, Agenda 21, Alan. Over here now, I've noticed, very much so, if you go into the local council's websites, possibly 3-4 years ago, you would never find anything on Agenda 21. And now it's everywhere. They've got full pages on this stuff. And I wrote an FOI to the local council here. And they wrote back, and they've got all this local plans, this, that, the next thing. All this stuff they're doing for the environment. And I asked how much he's spending on this. And they said £1,000, which is obviously a lie, because, I mean, it probably cost them more than that for the website.
Yeah.
But, and they're not even, they're not hiding the fact they're doing it, but they're hiding what they're doing and couching it in different language to make it sound all fluffy and nice. But this, of course, all sprang out of the Rio Summit and Maurice Strong and Mr. Gorbachev back in Rio 1992. But as you said, it's been on the go a lot longer than that. But obviously that was a point where they thought we can go with this and get away with it. And they're certainly a long way down the road of that now. And the Somerset thing is just an example of it. I don't know, are there any kind of major examples similar to that? Not necessarily flooding, but other things happening in your part of the world?
Well, I know there's going to be flooding this year when the snow melts, because there's never been so much since the 1960s, apparently. And the cold temperatures, too, is great business for plumbers and road workers, because there's plumbing going out all over the place, all over the country, and the States, too. And but getting back to the Air Summit, I mean, Maurice Strong himself was picked up by the Rockefeller himself. They actually take on proteges. In fact, I know of a recent one who was picked out of a place in the US, a university there, and to travel with Rockefeller family wherever they go. They trained him. So they did the same thing with Maurice Strong. They picked him up and trained him for his position in the world. Again, an unelected technocrat, you might say, who gets things done behind the scenes. A big player in it all, too. But again, the draft for the Rio Summit was written up by Rockefeller himself. So he just simply presented it to them. But the thing is, it's an ongoing agenda. And Madeleine Albright's grandfather, I think it was, or father, was a Palestinian. And Stalin talked about the future and said eventually they'll have to have front organizations which will take over from the Communist Party. Remember, the communism dictatorship was still going to last a generation, according to Lenin, which it pretty well did. At that time, it was a 70-year thing, a generation. So he came up, he was given the first idea to start what was called a Green Party. And then it was put into the States. But it was Madeleine Albright's relative, her ancestor, or granddad, who started it all up. And under the guise, again, of saving the world from us, you see, then again, the intelligentsia, the pre-existing foundations have to have a monopoly over control over all resources. And these foundations, as I say, are the fronts for the most powerful, richest families on the planet. So democracy has never ruled the people, ever. In fact, it's a great sham. It stopped a lot of revolutions because you always vote in a new party and you live in hope. But it's been a great panacea to an extent. But they hope to train the public, and they have been training the public not to even be involved in the play acting of politics. Just accept the fact that experts are ruling the world. And that's happened pretty well since the 60s. That's when Russell said that we'll train them to believe the experts, and people above them, special people, are dealing with all the big problems in the world. Just leave them to it and play yourselves at the bottom. Well, that's kind of the society they've got us to today. Very few folk today, in fact, the true statistics of people who bother voting, it's all low, because even the folk who don't know the scams that go on, they might see some of them, but they don't know the big picture. They just know it stinks and it doesn't get you nowhere. It's a con. And getting back to even the days of the American Revolution, you find that some of the founding fathers in the States said, whenever you see, as Jefferson said it, an agenda continue between changes in the House, he meant of politics, of parties, the same agenda continuous regardless of who gets in, then you know you're under tyranny. And we've been under it for over 100 years.
Well, absolutely. I experienced a little bit more of that in the airport today, but I'm getting used to it now. How did Gorbachev get involved, or is that in some way directly linked with the Albright family and others over there? Yeah,
I've no doubt on that. And Maggie Thatcher. I mean, Maggie Thatcher too had her orders from prime ministers and presidents are the front people for those behind them. You see, their job is to become unpopular. And that's why they last a certain time and then they're out. They've done their part in the agenda and they get well rewarded for it. So you'll find that Gorbachev, again, KGB guy and the whole thing, I think it was Andropov trained him as well. He knew him very well. And they knew that they were to come in to this United Europe idea. Remember, the whole idea was to get all forces to get a United Europe, where it was communistic or whatever. It didn't matter, because in reality it would be a monopolization run by the same old folks. And they've got what they wanted. So they knew it was time now to start dissolving, as they said, this dictatorship over the proletariat. That's really what it should be called. And the Rees Commission, going back to the 1950s in the US, where the Congress got a commission going in to investigate these foundations to find out why the richest corporations in the US were funding what seemed to be left-wing and communistic groups. Norman Dodd was one of the head guys there, and he talked to the heads of Ford and Carnegie Institutes as well as Rockefeller. The guy at Ford said to him, he says, our job is to so change the culture of the West. And culture involves all your reality, everything that's normal to you. So that they'll blend seamlessly through education and so on of the youth into the same system, not quite capitalist, not quite communist. Exactly the same thing that Lenin had said at the beginning of his particular reign of terror over there, that would last for about a generation and become not quite capitalist and the term they're using today is socialist, and they've trained the guys at the bottom to think socialism is something where they pay money in and get something back, but nothing's further from the truth. Socialism is the type that H.G. Wells was talking about in Bernard Shaw, where an intelligentsia, an elite, a scientific elite, would run and academic elite on behalf of the masters, the power men and so on, would run us like robots, basically, for the good of the world in an orderly fashion. That's where your school to work idea came from. In the Soviet system, they brought in Pavlov. They studied humanity perfectly well, and they said, why allow them to grow up and then choose what they want to work at? Why not just pick what they're good at when they're young, give them tests, and so on, and train a guy to be a plumber or a carpenter or an electrician, and don't bother giving them all the education with history and geography. It won't be necessary for them, etc. And that's what they were doing there. Now it's the same thing here. They're doing the same thing here in North America.
What we're getting coming in now is, well, I think it's had 3 readings. It's not gone to Parliament yet, but the National Service Bill. And anybody in this country with children listening to this, your child is going to be taken from you and forced into the military, basically. They've got all this other stuff in there, or you can work for a charity, or you can work for helping the elderly or whatever. I mean, I don't know what they're going to help the elderly to do, possibly to die off, but they're certainly killing them off at a remarkable rate over here as it is.
Oh yeah.
But it's how can I put it? It always amazes. I mean, this is a kind of side issue, but it's amazed me over the last, I suppose, especially over the last 5 years or so. Say, it's how dependent just ordinary people have become on the most meaningless things. I remember looking out the window in Edinburgh when I stayed up there a few years ago, and there was 2 crossings at traffic lights for the roads, and you would see grown adults in their early 20s, late 20s, 30s, 40s, waiting for somebody in their 70s to come out with a little lollipop and help them across the road. And I just thought, what is wrong with these people? And there was no traffic coming.
Yeah.
And it reminded me, because I spent a bit of time in Eastern Europe, and they will not cross the road until the lights change and they're told to go.
Yeah.
It was just exactly the same. And the children here are being taught that as well. And I was on a flight today, and the language of the stewardesses and the pilot, when they welcome you on board and stuff, it's as if they're talking to 10-year-olds. It's demeaning. It's like, please disengage your brain before you get on the airplane. And listen to this rubbish.
A good thing to do, you mentioned Gorbachev. I mean, he put books out, again, to popularize him in the West, when he was still really the head of the Soviet Union. And this is after his tour with Maggie Thatcher. Remember, Maggie Thatcher was given the job of introducing this new type of communist, this swinging communist to the West, And they brought him to London. They took him to the best tailors and made his flashy suits and so on, so he wasn't drab, etc. And tried to give him this image. They also made a deal with all the press that came out years later, that the press would not ask him any questions to do with the system of communism in Russia. They were told the topics they could ask him and his wife about, such as free facelifts there for women on this. Just walk off the street into a store and they'll give you a facelift. All this rubbish, and hairdressing and all the trivia, etc. The same techniques they use in making a star on American Idol or whatever. Same cons, because it's all run by Hollywood, the culture industry. But anyway, they got all the pros over from the States to do that whole PR blitz of this tour with Gorbachev, the new modern communist, to launch him to the world. And then they did a vote in the States afterwards, after this massive blitz of how great the guy was, and gave him interviews on television. And they said about 75 of the people liked him so much they'd vote for him in the States. I mean, that's the power of propaganda. That's how you make any star. But Gorbachev wrote in a book, it was a coming age or something. It was to do with this blending of the two systems. And if you read those communistic books in the standard communistic style that was put out by the old Politburo, they are written as though they're written for children. Literally, it's so childish that this very short sentences, etc., of what they're doing. Now he said in that book he put out after his tour, he said the system's coming in. He says we'll need a kind of a new religion. He said it will have to be based on a form of earth worship. Well, that's your greenie and all the rest of it, you see. So they train the children about nature, the oneness, the singularity, all this kind of rubbish they've been pushing, and that's all connected. But again, there's partial truth. When you kill off the planet, we die too, sure. But the thing is, it's for the elite to manage it for themselves and their own profits, etc. As they accept the proper way to run the world, which they know how to do, and they of course incredibly get rich off it too at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, he's anybody who's unfamiliar with the Green Agenda website, there's a number of quotes by Gorbachev on there, and I think that quote you mentioned is in there about the New World Religion as well.
Well, an interesting thing is funny that because, as I say, the guy in the States and the family in the States that were to be the head of a lot of this were the Rockefellers. That was their appointment. And old man Rockefeller said that competition, literally he says, competition is a sin. The idea was to monopolize everything, you see, and run it properly, as you say, including your behavior, including how you'd live, right down to the bottom level, from birth to death. It's like Gerfek in Scotland there, same idea. And
yeah, I heard
then
Gorbachev introduced here.
Yeah, and then Gorbachev, he certainly was putting out all the same spiels, but old man Rockefeller saw himself as a kind of hidden master. He was into theosophy and all this stuff, You find in these psychopathic types at the top, they look back in their family ancestry, which has been utterly ruthless. They do eliminate all competition by every possible means. And then they say, well, we've got all this wealth, we must be superior to the average man. So he believed in eugenics. Theosophy backed him up on that. The hidden masters, as they call themselves, they used that to put their headquarters in New York. He funded that headquarters for theosophy. So they used the New Age movement and all the rest of it to promote all this greening and take over, all for their own worth. But you find Gorbachev also, in one of his big interviews that he gave, he had a picture of Christ on his wall, then a picture of himself next to it, painted to look like Christ. I mean, these guys are megalomaniacs, these particular, and these are not the top fellas, they're still worker bees. Yeah.
Yeah, well, here's another little quote by Gorbachev under the auspices of Green Cross International. Nature is my God. To me, nature is sacred. Trees are my temples and forests are my cathedrals.
That's right. That's the old Masonic grove idea, that they prattled on about. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, they talk about sustainable development and all the rest of it. I've noticed that the latest words, and I heard that again yesterday from Osborne talking about the budget, and they've all started talking about resilience. Everything's to be resilient now. There's websites up there for resilient children. We've got the Guardian newspaper's got a section called Guardian Cities, and they go on about resilient cities, and it's the Rockefeller Foundation's 100 Resilient Cities who sponsors that section of the Guardian newspaper. Mm-hmm. So, and again, I was surprised to hear it in the budget, but it's obviously one of the new buzzwords. So we'll have to watch out for that and see what they apply that to.
It's also they used to call a different name for it too in the States, sustainable cities and so on, in different areas. That there were all the greeny cities that had bicycles attached to buses. You could put your bus, you had these big racks for bikes. You could attach it to the bus and then take the bus and then get back off and get the bike again. Things like that, and these are your model cities under the United Nations, but now they're calling them resilient cities that are all eco-friendly and full of agencies that spy on you and all that to make sure you are, etc., etc. They train the public, in other words. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're down in London just a bit, and you can see all the Barclays bikes there, which I think Boris paid £600 a piece for when they were only 140 quid or something.
That's right. Yeah.
And now, just last week, I do a Monday show now and do kind of news articles similar to what you did, but not with as much knowledge, of course. But what's his name? Clegg, who's another communist, of course, and his background's in the Soviet Union.
And Osborne's too,
Yeah. Well, he came out and said that he wants to see all petrol and diesel cars off the road by 2040. Now nobody's elected this guy. even if the
No,
election system worked, he's never been elected anyway.
no.
Uh, and and then of course the day before or the same day they were pushing the electric car, and and these things are useless.
Yeah, yeah.
But the Guardian as well, I think, put out an article which I read a month or so ago, where some of these characters from Top Gear had taken one of these electric cars from Marble Arch in London to Edinburgh, and they did it in 12.5 hours. And I thought that sounds a bit dodgy. So they said they stopped 9 times, a half an hour a time to charge up this thing. So you take that off, and that leaves 7.5 hours, and that's exactly what it said on one of the route guides.
Mm-hmm.
So you think, well, I can't even do that in a petrol car if I'm speeding.
Yeah.
So that's just the whole thing was garbage.
Well, they've also had so many of them go on fire. They're nasty for going on fire, these things. And apart from that, they never tell you how much it costs for that massive rapid charge. It's a fortune it costs you for that. But remember, Agenda 21 says that in these little public areas where you're all to be crammed in and you live, there's to be no private property. It's rental only. There'll be private landlords, by the way, that own whole chains of cities. But no, you won't own them yourself. Is it you rent? And there's to be no private vehicles, only essential vehicles only. That's your police, ambulances, and so on. But no private ones. So this is all part of Agenda 21. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's quite easy. You see, they don't forbid you to travel. They simply make it impossible eventually for you to travel. Or you can't travel in that old car. It uses gasoline, et cetera, et cetera. And the States are adding, they've signed, and so is Britain, by the way, they've signed the international treaty through their fake front UN again, to add more ethanol to the fuel. That's what they call biofuel, but it's ethanol. It's really a wood alcohol. And they want to go up to 30%. Now, all the small engines manufacturers are complaining because ethanol ruins the standard gasoline engine. It just burns your pistons out, in a month or two. So this is agenda. They won't forbid you to travel. They simply make it impossible for you to travel. Oh, you can't travel on that thing unless you use ethanol. Which if I use ethanol, my car's going to get burned out. Well, we can't help that, sir. You can still travel if you get an electric car, And this is the standard technique they've used down through the ages for changing your behaviour. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, another part of that is that they're going after the scrapyards here and shutting a lot of them down, or making it impossible for them to operate with the legislation and all the rest of it.
Same in Canada too, in the States, yeah.
At the same time, the European Union is coming out and saying that we need to have rules so that you can only put a generic part on your car. So if it's a Volvo, you've got to use a Volvo part, etc., etc. And I've got a 20-year-old Volkswagen Passat, left-hand drive. And the exhaust on that is, I think it's got 5 different parts from 5 different cars, makes and models, and all the rest, all welded together, and it works. But I wouldn't be able to get MOT here, so I don't. It gets MOT'd in the country where it's been welded together.
Yeah.
And it works perfectly well. So, I mean, when we talk about sustainability and recycling, well, that's a perfect example of it. I've got a 20-year car that runs on gas, not on LPG, and that's not good enough.
No. Everything that's passed is again like Baruch said. For everything that they say is a good reason and there's a real reason. Well, we never get the real reasons, you see, until you can think it out yourself. Yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah, you mentioned Charles Galton Darwin earlier, and from his book The Next Million Years, 1952, civilization has taught man how to live in dense crowds, and by that very fact, those crowds are likely ultimately to constitute a majority of the world's population. So that's where we are now. Already there are many who prefer this crowded life, but there are others who do not, and these will gradually be eliminated. Life in the crowded conditions of cities has many unattractive features, but in the long run these may be overcome, not so much by altering them, but simply by changing the human race into liking them. So, we could. Huxley said the same thing. People will come to enjoy their servitude. And
well, you can. People can train. See, if you do it the Fabian style of training, we adapt and adapt and adapt, and eventually they adapt right into it without even being conscious that they have. Until literally, you could take the so-called the primitive man of Brave New World, who was a normal man, and put him in with the hybrids. they would listen to everything he talked about morality and love, etc. And these new folk would be polite and listen, but they couldn't fathom what this man was talking about. I mean, they had promiscuity. No one gave a live birth. It was all done genetically and test tubes, basically. You can train people into accepting anything. I've watched it in my own life as they've really radically altered the cultures through the cultural wars. These were wars, cultural wars, all designed and used and implemented and let go and let loose on the public from the top down, not from the bottom up, and been awfully successful until, if you meet someone today who talks about being celibate, you'll think they're nuts, And yet that's how they were for thousands of years until you got married, because the idea of being self-sufficient is that the outcome of promiscuity is going to be children. Well, who's going to take care of them? Well, you bring in the government, you bring in the taxation system, you bring in agencies, until you get this massive welfare system, all living awfully well off of you. I'm talking about the agencies. They get incredible paychecks, some of them. And from the fallout that they create. They always profit off the fallout they create, But mankind at one time, you took care of your own and you took care of your neighbours, but you certainly didn't pay for everybody else's children.
Yeah. Well, I did a little job in a creche, they call them. And it was a paint job, and I was painting all these different rooms. And there was children in there, newborn. Basically newborn children, and they'd been brought into this place in the morning and left there with the nanny, and it went all through the age groups up to pre-secondary school age. But you had the breakfast club, you had the afternoon club, and you had all the different age groups all getting taught this stuff from all these people who were into the whole green agenda. I don't think anybody was employed there that had a different idea in their head whatsoever. And this stuff was just being pumped into these children. They were sat in front of the television screens watching these videos. And upstairs, there was a plaything. And this is like a big warehouse, this place. And you go upstairs, and the playrooms are cages.
Yeah.
They throw them in cages with these bouncy mattresses and shut the door. And I just thought, well, there you go. That's it. Train them up to be animals.
You see, Russell too, Bertrand Russell was the first one in the 1920s to be allowed to try experimental schools for the future. And he was given a royal charter to do this, because what he was doing was illegal, the things that he was pushing and trying on these children. And so by the 1930s and 40s, he knew how to manipulate the minds of the youth. And he said, we, and he's talking about on behalf of his hereditary lordship, and all the upper class. He said, we used to think that we'd have to take the children away from their parents. Now, this, in order so they wouldn't become contaminated with old ideas of independence and families, etc. This is a lord talking on behalf of the British peerage. This is something you expect from the communist side, right?
Yeah.
And until you realize it's all the same. He says, but now we've found out, he said, that with scientific indoctrination of a child, if we can get them early, at the age of 2 or 3, with scientific indoctrination, he says we can have them for 4 or 5 hours a day. And whatever their parents try to communicate of their old values, etc., will be irrelevant. The child will dismiss them because scientific indoctrination is so perfect. So this is it's his system they're using today. It was all designed, whatever happens today was designed 70-odd years ago or more,
Yeah. Well, I mean, this Scurfec thing in Scotland, I'm going to become a grandparent again in about 5 months' time. And it'll be, I've got one granddaughter already, but she was born before the Scurfec thing came in. But I'm looking at ways where that can be avoided, and you can stop this social worker coming into the house, because literally, I mean, if you leave a toy lying about on the floor, or you've not emptied your bins, or anything, you've just had a bad day and your house isn't very tidy, they're going to be reporting on you, and that child will be taken off you. I mean, that's the way it's going, and it's pretty obvious.
Again, it's worldwide, because whatever happens in one country is happening globally at the same time, because it's all done through various treaties and organizations of the United Nations.
Yeah,
they all sign on to.
Yeah, I heard something, and there was something in the media a couple of weeks ago in regards to England, and it was obvious it was going down the same road. But I don't know if to be honest, I left Scotland in 1999 because I was just sick of the people. I just thought they've just given in completely to all this stuff, and I couldn't live there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's why they tried it there first. Maybe that's why they tried the poll tax there first.
Scotland was a big test case of partly despondency. They were trying that for deculturalisation purposes since the Battle of Culloden, basically, when they forbid the Scots even to speak Gaelic or on pain of death. If you want to destroy a people, you start by destroying their culture. That involves language and everything else, and customs and history. And if they wore tartan, that was an instant hanging offence, unless your clan joined the British Army and went abroad to fight for the Empire. That lasted for quite a while. And at home, too, they brought in all the teachers from England, who, just same in Ireland too, by the way, and they ruled with an iron fist. And you had to speak the Queen's English, etc., and so on and so on. And if you spoke your own language, you were punished severely physically, right up until the 50s with the belt, etc. So that was a complete process of deculturalization of a people who were really a satrapy of London. Their history was blotted out. Very old history Scotland has. It's nothing like they're given in the more recent books. And that was blotted out, and they were made to feel despondent. London also decided in the 1960s that Scotland would be turned into a tourist area, and they would gradually deindustrialise it before the rest of the country. And so they did. So despondency, unemployment, no future. Of course, in the late 70s, early 80s, they brought in the drugs, heroin trade, big time. To destroy what was left as well, and there you have it. That's how this is an ancient technique. It's been used before, but it was used on Scotland deliberately as a huge test case for other countries.
I mean, I speak to people abroad, and even people in England and Ireland. They say, "Oh, Scotland's quite a big place," And I go, "Well, yeah, it's fairly big." I say, "But there's only 5 million people there." And they go, "How many?" And I say, "Yeah, you got Aberdeen, Inverness, Dundee, Edinburgh, Glasgow." And that's
right.
it. That's it. The rest of it's empty.
Well, I used to see people meet in the Highlands and the tourists, and they'd say, "Oh, gee, this is really beautiful. Look at all this space and hills." And I says, "Yeah." I says, "It's amazing to think that millions of folk used to live here." And they didn't know. I says, "Yeah, they cleared these highlands." I says, "You read John Preble, The Line in the North, the Highland Clearances and all the books he put out. From sources from original historical sources from London that kept secret there for a long time, and they talked about the hundreds and hundreds of boats that came year after year as they were shoving them on these boats and clearing them off into the colonies, as they call them. And many of them were so bad by these rogue merchants that they put their old ships out there. They could see them sinking off the coast with all their families on it. Lots of them died that way. Folk have no idea of the cultural genocide, but and by the way, under the Treaty of the United Nations, even destroying your culture is included in genocide, by the way. Never mind the physical destruction as well. So London had to do that. And then when you read the books of the economist John Stuart Mill and his son as well, the same name, and you couple that with H.G. Wells' one as well, they both had the Scots and the Irish down for liquidation because they kept rebelling. They wouldn't adapt, he said.
Yeah, I mean there were many millions more in Ireland then as well as than there are now, and but I mean I've spent 12 years in Ireland, and at least they've still got a bit of fight, but they're certainly going after them and trying to take it out of them. That mainly through economics, as to be said at the moment, and but also, and we'll get onto this we're in the second hour, but we'll get onto this next because it's part of the same thing, the entertainment industry, and they're really they built up the rugby team and their football team, and that's the whole focus of the attention. They've gone away from the Gaelic games kind of thing, the traditional games that used to play in the villages and stuff, and it's all now become this multinational corporate thing. So yeah, we'll come back and talk about the media, the entertainment industry, and the sports, the Colosseum, and all that stuff that Wells talked about as well.
Yeah.
After the next piece of music. Welcome back to the second hour of Reality Bytes Radio on the 20th of March 2014 with our guest Alan Watt of CuttingThroughTheMatrix.com. And Alan, you've got other sites as well. If you want to just throw them out there while we're talking about that.
Yeah, I've got, if they go into countrythematrix.com, they'll see other sites listed, but I also have, for Europe, I've got also Alan Watts Sentinel.eu, it is, the EU. So it's Alan Watts Sentinel.eu, and they can get there. Not only that, they have all the shows on it. Not all the shows, there are a lot of shows to put on there, but they also have transcripts of many of the shows I've done too, for if you want to read them. So there's a lot of information there. It's all free too, you know.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're talking off air, and we kind of touched on it before we went to the break. The entertainment industry, the media, of course, sport comes into entertainment. I mean, you could talk about this for hours, as with Agenda 21, but, well, you were in that industry, so that's possibly your experience is where we start.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is, it's nothing like you're taught by television or the British Idol or American Idol, etc. It's rigged. It's very rigged. Everything's rigged. It's a complete system. It's a complete system where everyone must know everybody else in the system who run you at the bottom if you go in as a musician. And it's a very old system, by the way. Long before records came in, it was just a clique running the culture industry. You'll find that... Go back to the days of Plato, they knew how important it was to give plays out, certain kinds of plays, the proper kind of plays, as they say, on behalf of the establishment, and the proper kind of music. So much so that Plato wanted musicians to be licensed back then, because he said that rhyme, if put to revolution within music, could really incite the youth to riot. So they knew back then the power of the arts, as they called it. And it was so powerful too that the establishment in Athens and other places too, in the Grecian Empire, had made it mandatory that everyone, even the slaves, had to turn up when big drama teams would come through or acting teams would come through on their tours in ancient times, and had to watch it because they get their updates like we get our updates today on what's PC and what the establishment wants. And it all came from the top down. Well, that's never changed. Any ruling establishment always gives you what you're supposed to believe, and it's repetition too after that. And they will not tolerate any dissension from the status quo and then from the this is it type of thing. So I think Adam Curtis did an awfully good presentation on some of the stuff using the footage from the BBC, old footage, on the culture, part of the culture industry of Britain, how it changed during the 60s, the 50s and 60s, and how it showed you some of the old clips of the old TV shows they used to show, Dixon and Doc Green, things like that, you know, the policeman is your friend in the neighbourhood type of thing, all to make you think that's how it really was. We're all wonderful people. And then he showed you the radical change from the 60s when they started showing you other parts of the system that you'd never really noticed before, you took for granted. And you couple that with Jacques Ellul, who the philosopher who in France, who said that all drama to do with government law and law in all of its arms, including the court systems and the police, any dramas to do with hospitals, for instance, professions, etc. These are all propaganda spiels. It doesn't matter. They'll give you a good hook to get you in a mystery or something to make you watch it to the end. But you're getting downloaded with propaganda until you think they're all so perfect and it's so caring and they're there for us. That's why they exist. But nothing is further from the truth, you see. So it's the same with today with the delivery of pornography. You can't watch anything without some kind of porn being in it. Especially for the youth, all the horror movies are simply, I call them tits and bums movies, because that's what they are. And that's when their hormones are raging, and they have a storyline there, a very thin storyline always, with lots of screaming and chasing and terror. But they always have sex in there because that's the message. So the story is a delivery mechanism for the porn. That's what it is. Folk don't even realize it themselves. You'll find it too getting shoved into the adult populations, because H.G. Wells wanted to abolish marriage altogether, as many of them did, in fact. And the state would eventually authorize who should have a child and by whom, and they wouldn't necessarily live together. That was the old agenda, which has come true for most folk. the state would rear them or be co-partners with them in the rearing of the children. So everything's been accomplished through the gradual abolition of the culture, through people adapting into the new system that was delivered to them by primarily fiction, you see. It's the greatest tool ever designed, is fiction. You can get new messages across. Children especially will mimic. They're born mimickers, whatever they see. That's why even their language is fantastic. Children can learn 5 languages if they're trotting around the world before they're 10. And they pick them up so fast because they're mimickers. They lose it eventually as they go on. So if you can get them very young and start to, as Bertrand Russell was doing in his experimental schools in the 20s and 30s, he said if we can get the children hypersexualized before puberty, until they're obsessed with it, he says they'll never stick with a partner long enough to have a child, never get married, you see. So the culture industry is one of the main parts of directing the future in the Fabian style. We are short-term thinkers as human beings. We plan short-term, men especially more than women. We want to go and build something and do it and get it done, and that's it. The big boys know that using the Fabian style through maybe a period of 70 years, you got 3 generations growing up, about 20 years old having a child, and then 20 years old having a child, so on. You simply push the envelope with each generation until your granny can sit with her daughter and her daughter and watch the envelope for porn on TV getting pushed, until eventually you'll have live sex, even in comedy shows. I said that many years ago. That's the stage where they want to bring it down. And the big thing that Aldous Huxley's brother, Julian Huxley at UNESCO, said in his famous speech there, he was a co-founder of Planned Parenthood. He wanted to kill most of the children, actually, the working classes. He won't need them in the future because we won't have all these jobs for them. He said that, along with Margaret Sanger, that children are weeds, basically, for the working classes. But he also gave the agenda there for the future by using the culture industry, etc., to train the general public not to have children, hypersexualize them, dehumanize them to an extent too, he says, until we knock them off their pedestal, thinking they're the supreme being on the planet, until they realize they're only another animal. When they believe they're only another animal, they'll accept the indoctrination and the orders coming from experts who will be running them. Well, that's where we are today.
Yeah, I saw a headline in one of the rags during the week, and it was Kate and Will holding the baby, and the big headline above it was "One's enough." And you thought, well, there you go. But you're talking about the pornography, and on Monday I read out 2 articles actually contrasting. One was in one of the broadsheets talking about how they were going to teach pornography in school, and they had to. Some porn was okay, some of it was good, some of it was bad. It was neither here nor there. It was all moral relativity and all that stuff. And then there was another one in the Guardian, of course, which boasts of having Charlie Skelton, who supposedly protests against Bilderberg, and his colleague Victoria Corin, who went over to Amsterdam and produced a hardcore pornography movie and wrote a book about it, and very proud of the fact. But that's the Guardian, and they were doing an ads, really, as you've mentioned many times before, that most of these stuff that's put in the papers are ads, and it was an application for your mobile phone to teach you how to perform oral sex on a woman, and it had people licking the phone and all this stuff, and I set up this new Monday thing just to read through the articles, and I don't really read over them before I go to air, because I want to be as shocked myself as the audience are. And I got halfway through that, and I just thought, oh God, I should have read this, but it's disgusting, and it's in the mainstream media.
It's mainstream, but it all comes from the mainstream. I can remember when they brought out Top of the Pops. At least I was small when it was out, actually, but. That was Jimmy Savile, of course, and they had Pan's People on there that were the go-go dancers that wore hardly anything at all, etc. But that was all pushed by the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation. It's a crown corporation owned by the government, So here's the elite once again. And by the way, but at that time, every employee at the BBC had to have gone to Eton. You couldn't get in unless you were from Eton. So here's the British establishment, the wealthy, making sure that the elite were going to be, the ordinary folk were going to go completely degenerate by copying all the stuff that they were getting put in their face, etc. At the same time, they were throwing out LSD, etc., etc. You know, and I mean throwing it out. They were coming out and tossing bags of it over the university walls. You know, so this was a big push on behalf of those who already ruled by commerce through monopolization, etc., and the British Empire, to alter the culture to the next step for total control of the public. And, well, look at it today, it's dysfunctional, you know. It's meant to be dysfunctional. You know.
Yeah. What I've noticed now in particularly the American media, they have these series now. They have season 1, season 2, season 2. It just goes on and on and on and on. One of them's The Walking Dead. It's all about zombies who've apparently got a virus and they're going around eating people. But from what I gather, the zombies are actually us, and the people killing them are the ones that should go on and survive and all that stuff. And they've got people in there murdering children and all sorts of things going on. There's another one which is called Fallen Skies, and it's about an alien invasion. But I've kind of ploughing my way through these things to see where it's going, and it looks like these things are going to have been genetically modified, and they're all set up by the elite in the first place. And the other one is Revolution, where all the power goes out, and it's caused by nanotechnology and all this stuff. So I mean, we're being primed for it, and it's worse than dystopian. It's just pure anarchy and death and destruction and utter horrendous violence. And it's moved. It's interesting. It's moved from they're all fighting the same enemy, whether it be the aliens or the really bad people, just down to killing each other willy-nilly.
Well, yeah, since the 80s, they've been churning out these disaster movies of the end times, the end of the world, etc. And it's always there's always a dominant elite with the uniformed guards managing it on behalf of the World Corporation and the rest of the public living in rubble, etc. That's the story they've been pushing over and over again. And I kept wondering after that article that came out, I'd put on my website, just in the archive section from the Department of Defence for Britain, the think tank, when they put the 90-odd page report on the future. So the preparations for the military for the future conflicts and so on. And they said in it that they wanted to eventually have super cities across the world. There'll be the end of nations. They'll all be owned by corporations, basically. And what they didn't mention was all of the people. What happened to all the people that didn't get into those cities across the world as they're abolishing nations and all? Well, they'll have to be killed off one way or another, you see. And that's what they're really hinting about in their articles when you read it very carefully, is how to eliminate all the rioters and flash mobs and blah, blah, blah that will be out there who are unhappy with it all. I mean, these are the scenarios they play out in their big think tanks all the time, on how to deal with the general public and still achieve their objectives always to the future, for their own survival of this elite and the system that is employed to take care of them. So they're way ahead of it all. And that's where a zombie, remember, is someone that used to be alive, meaning intelligent and bright. That's what it means. And he's poisoned. Never forget that a zombie is poisoned and then brought back from the dead as a slave. That's the traditional meaning of a zombie. And the person who poisoned them and brings them back, revives them, is now the master. So they're giving you all these little subliminal things and mocking us at the same time. They always mock the victim. Always. They can't help it, actually. They enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't watch television as such. I see bits and pieces online and stuff like that, and I watch these things just to see what they're trying to push out there. But I mean, the sport. If we take the sport, we talked on fair about it. We just had the Olympics, which incidentally there wasn't that much coverage over here about because it was in Russia, I guess. But the Winter Olympics, but the Summer Olympics, of course, were all over the place because they were in London, and. We're nearly at the stage where we're looking at one of these old movies with the gladiators and stuff like this, and everybody's hyped up to be the supreme being, as it were, of their specified specialist kind of bit in the pantomime, as it were. And the coverage in the press over here is sickening. I mean, somebody's knocked a piece of plastic over a net a few times and won a bronze medal, and all of a sudden they're all over the television and on the news on Newsnight, and they're the best things in sliced bread, but nobody heard of them 3 weeks before that. And we're all supposed to look up to these people, and that's the pinnacle of our achievement is to do this. Don't think about being an engineer or inventing anything or going out and helping people who need it and being a good human being, if you like. No. Just distract yourself. Go and do something useless. And the same goes in with the university courses. I mean, there's so many university courses here which I don't know. If I go back 25 years, children could have done them.
Yes, I know. I mean, some of them are utterly ridiculous. It's all political correctness as well. It's that too. Yeah. But that's what we got. I mean, flash in the pan careers, again, it's given you this ridiculous, as you say, you don't study and work towards something, just do a childish game like run a race. I mean, you give up those things when you leave school, when you're in primary school, that's when you run races and stuff, or run about with balls in a game. But again, you have massive wealthy folk owning all these big football teams in the States and soccer teams in Britain. It's a great corporate welfare system too, you'll find, because there are big arenas, sports arenas are generally paid for by the public through their tax money, given to them for free, And then they have all these tax deals too, because they're helping the city, etc., by attracting tourists, blah, blah, to watch the sports. Well, once their tax deal is up, after 15 years or whatever, they move off to some other place. I mean, it's the same with big corporations of any kind. Everything's a scam. And to be honest with you, I mean, is a pinnacle of success a guy who's running about with a ball on a field and getting millions of bucks for doing it? I mean, is that the whole point of civilization? No, it's not. It's nonsense. They're actually keeping you as a child in a sense. But as I say, that's when you give it up. It's just like the old Paul in the New Testament said, I think it was, when I was a child, I thought of as a child, and I did as a child, but now I'm a man, and I put all childish things behind me. So why have they revived all this nonsense? But again, because most folk today are powerless, men especially, actually, since all their indoctrination, since the 60s, and feel the whole guilt to the world for things they didn't do. But you'll find that they're so powerless, they either go crazy behind the driving, the wheel of the car. It's the only time they feel power is on the road, or else they live through vicariously someone running about with a ball in a field like a warrior. That's what they've got, because they're technically powerless in their own life. That's a fact.
Yeah, just talking about how childish it gets. I was down in Parliament yesterday, and I wanted to get a photograph over the top of the crowd, and I couldn't see because the police officers were there. So I knew it had their back to me, so I didn't want to jump up on the wall when they had their back to me in case they got the wrong idea. So I tapped one of them on the shoulder, and he turned around and I said, "Do you mind if I get up on the wall here? I just want to take a photograph." And he says, "Yeah, fine." He says, "Have you done a health and safety assessment?" And the wall was 2 feet high.
Yeah.
I said, "No, I'm an adult."
Mm-hmm.
And he just looked at me as if I had two heads.
Yes.
And he was dead serious.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Just unbelievable.
Well, yeah, you're living in the time of control freaks and authoritarianism where you can't do anything of your own free will. You have to get an expert to tell you it's okay or it's not.
Yeah.
It's all been achieved.
Well, definitely. I mean, there are a few people out there trying to fight back, but not enough at the moment, unfortunately. Not enough. We'll go to another piece of music, and then we'll hit the last 25 minutes or so, and take it away, Steve.
Freedom, law, education.
No lizards, no aliens, no nonsense. This is Reality Bytes in association with Sovereign Independent UK and One World Chronicle.
Okay, we're into the last 20-odd minutes or so with Alan Watts on Reality Bytes Radio. We've done Agenda 21, we've done a bit of the media entertainment industry. Well, let's talk about the media, Alan. you mentioned earlier that there was no law anywhere in the world that the media had to tell you the truth.
That's right.
And I mentioned earlier, I can't remember if it was on air or not, that yesterday was the most blatant example of the control of the media and all going through I did mention on there, going through the BBC. I mean, they had this big platform. They were the only ones raised off the ground. They were about 8-10 feet with this big platform with the roof on it, the canopy and everything on it, all the big lights up there. And that's where all the politicians went up to sit and get their interviews. And all the feeds from there, all the cables out of there went to all the other ones. And all the other media were just sitting there doing absolutely nothing and just taking this information and churning it out. And we had CNBC, the business channel, and they were quite close to the perimeter. And Norman Lamont was being interviewed by them at one point, and I think actually somebody from the Scottish National Party was there as well. But Norman Lamont was there, and I don't know if you've heard of Bill Maloney over here. He does Pie and Mash films. He's done a lot of films on paedophile rings and stuff in Britain, Elm House and other homes and churches and stuff that have been abusing children over decades. And he was shouting over to him, "Why don't you come and talk to me?" You know, and she was going, "Oh, you're disturbing our interview, all this kind of stuff." And I said, "Well, what are you talking about? You're talking about the price of cheese or something? You know, people are getting abused." And the police came up to me because we'd done a little interview with them over the cordon to camera, and the liaison guy came up to me and says, "Do you mind having a word with your friend and get him to come down here?" And I said, "No, I've done an interview with him already, thanks." And he says, "But you know him, he's disrupting that interview over there." I said, "It's not my problem, mate." You know, and they did not want anybody whatsoever talking out of turn on anybody's audio or whatever. And we were fortunate enough to be in there, I say fortunate, but we were in there, and deliberately so, not being provocative, because there's a sign in there. I can't remember the name of the street. The name of the street that's on anyway, and it's that specific area, College Green. It's part of the parliamentary estate, which means the people own it. But they can throw you off at any time for whatever reason they want. Yeah. And you think, well, where's your freedom of speech when you can't actually go onto a piece of your own property and voice your opinion to the media? But we weren't allowed to approach any of the media there because we wanted to ask them what they thought they were reporting.
Yeah.
You know, but they wouldn't talk to us. And one of them, I think the girl could only have been about 18, 19 years old, and she was doing interviewing of like the likes of Norman Lamont and people like that. And she said, "Oh, I can't talk to you guys because my editor would sack me."
Yeah.
I said, "Well, why are you in this career then? Because you ain't going to, you know, what pride do you get? What satisfaction is there in this?"
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to teach them at college, but. Maybe you know. I don't know.
Well, it's also self-interest. I mean, they've created, as Russell said too, will create a hedonistic, narcissistic society, more so with those who are or consider themselves middle class, and therefore they're quite willing to go along for their paychecks to do anything because they don't care about other people really, and they're on a winning side. They think, you see. And so they're willing to go along with it. That's part of the problem today. They have no empathy for others outside themselves or their own clique. So self-interest wins out for these kind of people, and they don't really care what's happening outside themselves. That's part of it.
Yeah. Another thing is I've mentioned it before on there, the Behavioural Insights team. The government department that's set into behavioural change and all the rest of it. And you go there, and the last thing they put up was organ donation, and that's been pushed in the BBC and all that now as well. You're selfish if you don't get yourself a donor card. All this, and it's the way they word the questions. It's all led in the direction they want, and they'll come up with statements which really don't have a right answer.
Sure.
That is to leave you in this kind of limbo where you think, oh, well, maybe that's okay, maybe it's not, but I'm sure somebody will get some benefit out of it, so it doesn't bother me, that kind of thing. And they just let it go, and you can almost hear the presenters smirking in the background saying, "Gotcha."
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. Well, Monty Python had that in their movie. It was The Meaning of Life. It starts off with the two guys who turn up at a doorstep asking for the husband's liver, you know. and it's a comedy, of course. But these guys knew the agenda. They knew this whole agenda. People never ask why today is there such a massive need for organs. It's a worldwide network, the organ donation business, big business too. And I know a surgeon who, he calls himself a harvester. He goes out and takes hearts and lungs of people. They've come up with a new technique today where they can actually keep the stuff fresh for much longer than they used to, so they can transport across the world. Massive market. So you think it's going to someone in your own country, hopefully someone you know, or someone local, but no, it's going to China for all you know, for some bigwig there. But I can remember, I think it was in the 90s, a big scandal came out in Britain because it started off in Halifax, Nova Scotia, apparently. There was a whole warehouse found of body parts. They came from the Midlands, I think, in England. And the investigation dragged on for a while. Little bits came out at a time. Apparently, parents had been told over a 10 or 15-year period that their children had died in hospital in this big National Health Service region, had been given what they thought were the corpses of their children and had them buried at the funeral. And then, but 3 or 4 times they had to redo it as they added more organs that they found stashed away in literally warehouses in England, and then eventually in Nova Scotia. It was never explained completely as to why this was happening, but the guy who was in charge of the National Health Service for that whole, I think it was in Manchester, that big area was Manchester or something, he apparently had ultimate authority to do all this from the top of the government. He was never charged for anything. It was never disclosed to the public as to why this ongoing collection of body tissues, body parts from thousands and thousands of children had even taken place. Were they experimenting on it? What were they doing? We are living at a bottom level in a reality that's obsolete in the past somewhere. But it's not in the present. Because what they're up to today, from the spraying of the skies to the electromagnetic fields that they're using and HARP and the Wi-Fi and all the rest of it, and everything else, we don't even know what reality is. We're reduced to what it says in the Daily Record or the Daily Mail or stuff like that. That's how bad it is as far as reality is for us. It's the bottom rung of the ladder that the general population are on at any one time.
Yeah, I mean the news, I'll call them newspapers, but the papers over here, I go into the paper shop and I'll leaf through them and just it's just bewildering that people actually read that stuff and take it in and think, well, okay, wow, they're talking about it in the shop, going, oh, that's terrible, or whatever it is. Oh, look at so and so, she's had her breast removed apparently, that kind of thing, and that's the conversation for the day. It's a conversation on the bus and the work, and it's. I mean, people used to actually talk about real issues, what was going on in their own community, and what's happened to Mrs. Smith last week because she broke her leg, and we're going around to help her tomorrow, and all that kind of stuff. And there's none of it anymore. We hear all this, oh yeah, we're looking after your community. Well, there is no community anymore.
No,
it's gone. And
I can admit, when I was small, in a sense, everybody around you in your street was your mum. Every woman was your mum. Because if you did anything wrong, they could run out and scalp you in the head, and that was it, and get off with it. And so everybody watched out for everybody else. That was the natural way of it. And you didn't have all the cops. You didn't need the cops, in fact, because everybody watched out for everybody else and helped everybody else out too. People who had cancers, I remember your folks would take turns in the streets cooking their dinners for them and taking them over and things like that. These were the real communities where folk knew who everybody was. They were concerned about everybody else. If your mum was in the hospital, one of the neighbours would feed the children while the mother's in the hospital. You had no problems you didn't need government agencies for all these things you have today. Because government agencies, remember, it's not just a two-edged sword. The reason they come out in the first place is the fake reason. The real reason is to gain more authority over you. So the real communities are pretty well gone. I can remember too when folk would get laid off and folk would have collections near to pay off the rent for the folk who couldn't afford it and stuff. I mean, this all came from the people themselves, because one day it might be your turn to get help, and that's how it worked quite naturally. And that had been that way for a long, long time. It's all gone now.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of gone full circle really, because I was when you were talking about the people helping each other out down in Somerset now. That's actually what's happening, and because they had to set up a big food store somewhere that people could get access to. I don't mean a shop. I mean, people just brought loads of food from all over. I mean, from up in Scotland and stuff. People were driving down with truckloads of food and leaving it for people, and that sense of community is actually returned there because through necessity, and they're now realising that the state has basically abandoned them, and they're starting to kind of look outside the box, as it were, and say, yeah, well, we can do this ourselves. We don't need these agencies to help us out.
And all you have to do now is abolish all the taxes that aren't coming down either for all these supposed services that don't exist. Yeah.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I sent an FOI to my council, and I said to them, "Excuse me, is this council tax or is it council's tax?" And she says, "Excuse me." I says, "Is it council tax or council's tax in the plural?" And she says, "What do you mean?" I says, "Well, I've got 3 councils on my bill. I thought I only had 1." And I says, what does this one do? And she says, "Oh, well, they do the roads." I says, "Well, what does road tax pay for then?" And she couldn't answer. "I'll get somebody to call you back on that." I says, "Oh, don't bother." I says, "Well, what does this one do?" She says, "Oh, they do the bins and stuff like that." I says, "Well, that's tangible. I can see that. I can see somebody's doing something." I says, "What does the parish council do?" She says, "Oh, they look after the public toilets in the village and some of the green areas." I say, "Well, they don't look after mine, and I don't use the toilets. So why am I paying for that? You know, so why can't the church pay for that? I mean, you know, what's that got to do with me?" But I did want one of the major councils to write back and say we funded the Gay Pride March last week, and say, you know, and write back to them and say, well, actually, I'm never going to benefit from that, and see what they said to that one. Yeah, because then I'm being discriminated against because I'm heterosexual.
Yeah, of course. But again, going back to even Lenin, and Lenin was put in. Remember, he came from Switzerland initially, and he wasn't Swiss either, but. Lenin said that the West will gradually create agencies, government agencies or services, he called them. He says they'll explode over the West over many years, in a generation or 2 or 3 generations. He said they'll become authorities over the people. That's their function, and that's exactly what they're for. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the one you mentioned earlier, and possibly the most sinister to date, is this Gurfek thing, because that's going to affect everything.
Well, the point is to literally examine every child born frequently, even monthly, for seeing if it's politically correct. If that child, especially the males, show any inclination for too much inquisitiveness, they'll be going in for rectification, you might say, to get them back on the authorized path. Of not asking certain questions, etc. So curiosity can be a dangerous thing today. You know, it's terrible, but it's a thing to say, but it's so true. Curiosity is forbidden in certain areas, and these agents are going to do psychological testing on them constantly. They want to see how they feel about, again, sexual issues, and also even before they're 5, they want to find out how they view other peoples and neighbours and different ethnic communities and so on and so on. Now, a child is curious, is going to have his opinions, and if that child's opinions, I mean, your opinions can change as you're learning, naturally, you know. But that's not going to work that way. It's going to be, oh, this child asked this particular question today, or he's made this little comment. So he'll go in for rectification, just like they've drugged them in the schools. If they show too much inquisitiveness, they're going to rectify those children. This is a total social engineering of a society, yeah, from birth, literally from birth, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it certainly is from birth in Scotland. I think they'll probably be at the hospital bed when the baby's born. Who knows?
Yes.
But you know, curiosity killed the cat. Well, they've moved up from cats. They're going to bump you off as well. And there was a thing came out a couple of weeks ago they first started touting this three-parent thing. They were going to mix the genes from three different parents, and now they're talking about multiple parents. So that the child isn't even going to have two parents at all.
Of course,
They've got nobody to relate to. They've not got a mother or father. They've just got this group of people who are supposedly their parents.
Here's what you have to understand. When these boys make a war on something, there's more involved than what you think initially. When the communists and the capitalists of the West said they'd have a war to destroy the family unit, there was more than just that. They both believed that eventually science was to control everything on behalf of the wild men, as Charles Galton Darwin called his own upper class, who could make decisions, who wouldn't be indoctrinated. And so the destruction of the family unit, it was only one part of one stage on the way to their goals. Homosexual liberation is a stage on the way to it. So is the lesbian movement and so on, the transgender movement, until all normalcy of the way tradition, the way it was, is destroyed. And then when everything's in flux, you can bring in the multi-parent family, and then eventually you won't even know even where the donors came from for different genes. This is all a staged plan, you see, step by step. But first you got to destroy all what was traditional and normal to bring it all in, and then hit them with all kinds of things that you think are unrelated, get you even fighting about it and arguing about it. They don't care about homosexuals or lesbians at the top. They don't give a darn, because they've never followed any traditional sexual morality at the elite down through thousands of years, for themselves. Never, ever. And the only important things that they have to do is to have at least have offspring. They don't care who from. Except it's from one of their own elite. And they don't have to even stay with them or live with them. And that keeps their progeny going. But you must destroy tradition to bring in the new. But once you're in flux, getting hit with so many things that you think are just silly, then it's to get to the real goal, which is anything's normal. Here's the new human engineered hybrid creation, etc., or the parrot cyborg even, or even a brand new being. I've got an old science book here where they talked about doing this very agenda, by the way, written by scientists, and they said that eventually if we need undersea divers, we use them now to repair the oil rigs in the North Sea, the guys who can weld underwater. It says, but we could do the same thing by creating gills in a human being. So all these things have to be done. If they suddenly brought in a half fish man, we say that's inhumane, blah, blah, blah. But you simply give a whole generation, hit them with all traditional destruction until anything goes. Lots of science fiction, and then you bring out your fish man. Nobody's going to care.
Yep. We've only got 5 minutes left. Give us a brief outline of what you're doing now. I know you were writing another book, or 2 books, 3 books, I don't know.
Yeah. And,
do you want to give them a plug?
Yeah, they aren't just quite finished yet, because I've got to get them all printed up. But I've gone into some things more deeper too. I've put more poetry out there as well. And what I've been doing this winter, apart from trying to get everything done, you wouldn't believe that if I hadn't taken this winter off, I would never have survived, because every day it's been shoveling snow. I mean, lots of snow. And my driveway isn't from the pavement sort of thing to the door. It's like hundreds of feet, a few hundred feet to get out of here. So I've been getting about a foot of snow a day, sometimes more. Sometimes day and night. So it's like 2 feet at times. I've never seen so much. If I had been trying to do a show at the same time, I'd have been burned right out, So I've been getting the books finished and up to date. Standing back and looking at the whole system of what people think is the opposition to everything that's going to see, because I know there's a lot of things out there that aren't quite as it seems. I'm well aware of it all, actually, and I know again too that the ones that they are genuine are fighting this. I know how they're destroyed or taken over and are misled even, So the boys at the top, never forget, are not stupid. I mean, when we at the bottom, as I say, we're at the bottom rung of reality. The guys at the top in the big think tanks are employed full time on specific problems for each think tank to deal with, just specific areas of their agenda. We at the bottom have got to try to find all of this stuff, which is almost impossible, keep track of it all, and find out what's important enough to put out a story on it and what's going on. That's one heck of a task. So I realized that the main thing is to come back to the basics of it all, come back to the history of it all, and keep to reality of it all too. And say, here's all your documentation on it. Here's the big players who helped develop the present culture we're living through today. Many of them are dead now, long dead. But all the changes we're going through right now were designed back in the 50s by guys now dead who worked at the big cultural industry think tanks. So we're living through a script, and it's time we stop this script, because at the end, it's not for our benefit. People also have to decide basic things like, what is freedom? If you get 100 people together today, you're getting 100 different answers. There's so much confusion out there. What literally is freedom? What do they want out of the system? What do they want? These things are never answered. As good as pointing to all the stories we're given to prattle on about and argue about. But what's the solution to this? Is there a solution to this? You have to get common agreements, because organisation is the only way you're going to fight this and overcome it. It's going to be organized. And then when you get organisation, you're guaranteed to have infiltration. Guaranteed to have infiltration. You'd almost have to have a mandate, and here's your top laws, like God's laws here. And if you see anybody at the top deviate from them, that's it, get them out.
Yeah,
that's it. You'd have to be utterly ruthless about it, strict. Yeah.
Well, I've heard you mention before that they talk about all these treaties and how difficult it'd be to unravel them, and I go along wholeheartedly with your own solution, and it could keep you warm for many a year, as that's a match. That's all you need, and just burn them. That's it. Game over.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's we've reached the end. Speedy 2 hours there, and well, thanks very much. And we'll talk off air about what's coming up next.
Yeah, sure enough. It's been a pleasure.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye now.